Ever feel like um, a plant, like stubbornly growing towards the sunlight? Like it has some secret wisdom about life.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
Today's deep dive, well, might just convince you of that. We're going deep, really deep into the world of organisms.
Oh,
And whether they're more than just puppets of their genes,
right.
think like scientific papers, a dash of philosophy,
Yeah.
and even Erwin Schrödinger himself grappling with life's paradox.
Yeah, it's a question that's haunted biologists, for centuries. Are organisms just complex machines following the rules, or are they somehow the authors of their own evolution? What's so captivating about your sources, I think, is that they just reignite this debate with some seriously compelling evidence.
It's like that choose your own adventure book, but like for evolution, the one we never knew existed.
Hmm.
And it all starts with this life's paradox thing. Schrödinger, in 1943, he was already wrestling with how life even exists given the laws of physics.
Right. Did he think we were all just walking, talking paradoxes? In a way, yes. He saw this inherent tension between the naturalness, but also the peculiarity of organisms. It's like trying to force a square peg into a round hole.
Okay.
On one hand, life follows, very clearly follows the laws of physics and chemistry. But then on the other, it displays this just incredible self-organization and complexity that seems to defy those very laws.
Okay, so Schrödinger was stumped. So then what did he propose as, possible explanations for this life's paradox?
Well, he came up with two main approaches.
Okay.
First, the order from order idea, suggesting organisms inherit a blueprint for their complexity. Like, imagine a crystal passing its structure down.
Hmm.
And this idea, this order from order, eventually paved the way for our understanding of DNA and genes.
So, our genetic code is like that inherited blueprint that's passed down through generations. It's why we look more like our parents than our neighbors.
Exactly. But here's the plot twist.
Okay.
Schrödinger also proposed the order from disorder approach.
Yeah.
This one's a bit wilder. It suggests that life's complexity could arise spontaneously from chaos, kind of like those mesmerizing hexagonal patterns, Bernard cells that you see forming in heated liquids.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
But I can see how explaining something as intricate as a human or a butterfly, even a single cell, just popping out of chaos, might be a tough sell for some people.
You're not wrong. It challenges our kind of traditional understanding of order and structure, but it also highlights this amazing self-organizing power of systems that are far from equilibrium, which is, a hallmark of life itself.
Okay.
Imagine a school of fish, moving as one, reacting instantly to a predator. It appears chaotic, but there's this undeniable order to it.
Okay, so we've got order from order, and we've got order from disorder.
Yeah.
So which one did Schrödinger think was the right answer?
He wasn't able to definitively say, but his work on order from order, it really helped lay the groundwork for what we call the gene-centric view of evolution that dominated the entire 20th century. However, as your sources point out, this gene-centric perspective, it might be a little too simplistic.
Too simplistic? You mean saying that the script is the whole play?
Yeah.
But the actors, the director, the lighting, all of that impacts the final performance, right?
Perfect analogy. And that's where this deep dive gets really interesting, because just focusing on genes as kind of the sole dictators of an organism's form and behavior, it ignores a really, really crucial player.
The organism itself.
The organism itself.
So we're saying that the organism is an active participant in its own evolution, not just a passive recipient of genetic instructions.
Exactly.
But if that's the case, how did we even get so focused on genes in the first place?
It's a classic case of when all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Okay.
Darwin's observations of populations led to this ensemble thinking, right? Focusing on the overall group rather than the individuals.
Okay.
It was a necessary shift in perspective at the time. It's like studying the flow of a river instead of each individual water molecule.
So instead of analyzing each bird in a flock, we shifted focus to the flock's movements as a whole.
Right.
Okay, that makes sense. But it sounds like we may have missed some kind of crucial details about the individual birds along the way.
Precisely. And scientists like Galton and Fisher, they reinforce this by developing statistical models for how traits are passed down through generations. But these models, while groundbreaking, were limited by the tools and knowledge of their time, right?
Yeah.
Primarily focused on observable, heritable traits within populations.
So we narrowed our focus, maybe a little too much, and forgot to zoom back in on the individuals within those populations.
Yeah.
It sounds like we need to kind of bring that organism back into focus. But where do we even start?
The sources suggest a pretty radical shift, actually. Ditching the idea of organisms as passive vehicles for genes,
Okay.
mere survival machines, as Dawkins put it.
Right.
Instead, think of them as active participants, the authors of their evolutionary stories.
Okay, I'm all for this organism as author idea, but how do we go from a cool concept to, like, actual scientific evidence?
That's the million-dollar question. One compelling avenue is this thing called epigenetics,
Okay.
which is the study of how environmental factors can actually change how genes are expressed and how those changes can be passed down to offspring.
What?
Yeah, it challenges that traditional, very rigid view of inheritance. Imagine your life experiences having the potential to influence your future children, even grandchildren.
Wait, so my environment could have a ripple effect on generations to come?
Yeah, it highlights this dynamic dance between genes, organisms, and their environment.
Oh, wow.
It's not just about those random DNA mutations being selected for or against. It's about organisms actively responding to their surroundings and those responses echoing through their lineage.
My mind is officially blown.
Yeah.
So we're talking about more than just, like, fitting into a pre-existing environmental niche. We're talking about actively shaping your own evolutionary path.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like the difference between reading a map and, drawing your own.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
that's where affordances come into play.
Affordances.
Affordances, think of it like this. The environment doesn't dictate, beneficial adaptations. It offers possibilities, affordances, that organisms can perceive and respond to. A fallen log might be an obstacle to you and me, but it's a safe haven for a salamander or a feast for, a family of mushrooms.
Right.
It's all about how you interact with what's around you.
So it's less about the environment, like molding organisms, and more about organisms choosing how to work with what they've got.
Yes.
They see a staircase and, maybe they climb it, maybe they build under it, maybe they use it to practice their skateboarding skills.
You're getting it.
Okay.
These interactions, these choices, they can change behavior, they can change development, even physical form over generations. It completely revolutionizes how we think about adaptation. It's not about passively fitting in, it's about actively shaping your evolutionary journey.
This is incredible. Yeah. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's rewind for a second. We've been tossing around this word inheritance like it's a simple concept.
Yeah.
But if we're saying genes aren't the whole story, then we need to dig deeper into what inheritance actually means in this new, more organism-centered view of evolution. Right.
You're spot on. And trust me, it's a fascinating rabbit hole to go down. We'll explore how scientists are broadening the definition of inheritance beyond just genes, looking at behaviors, cultural practices, even environmental factors as potential carriers of information across generations.
This is getting good. But for now, let's give our listeners a moment to process all of this mind-blowing information. We've covered a lot of ground, from Schrödinger's paradox to ensemble thinking to the limitations of the gene-centric view. Stay tuned. We'll be back soon with part 2 of this incredible deep dive, where we'll unpack this expanded view of inheritance and really start to grapple with the idea of organisms as active agents in their own evolution. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to the deep dive. Last time we kind of left off with this idea of inheritance needing a serious makeover. So if genes aren't the be-all and end-all, then what else makes it into the inheritance mix?
Well, it's like realizing your grandma's cooking secrets weren't just about the ingredients. It was those little techniques, the ones passed down over generations.
Okay.
We're talking about non-genetic inheritance,
Oh,
and
right.
and it's more common than you might think.
Okay, so spill the tea. What are these other ingredients, these secret techniques that shape inheritance?
One fascinating example is something called behavioral inheritance. Remember those British birds, the great tits, that learned to peck open milk bottles?
Oh, yeah.
That wasn't a genetic mutation,
No.
it was cultural transmission.
Oh, yeah, they learned that trick from watching each other, right?
Exactly.
And it spread through the community like wildfire.
Like wildfire. And this kind of behavioral inheritance, it can have a huge impact on evolution,
Right.
influencing foraging, social interactions, even like tool use. Think about it. A single bird figures out a new food source, teaches its flock, and boom, an entire lineage benefits. It's a powerful stuff.
It really makes you wonder how much of what we call instinct is actually learned behavior that's passed down through generations. Like maybe our ancient ancestors weren't born knowing how to build a fire,
Yeah.
but they definitely learned from the best.
Right. It blurs the lines between nature and nurture, doesn't it?
It does.
And Cultural inheritance takes this a step further. We're talking about languages, traditions, skills, everything passed down through learning and social interaction. It's what makes us human, right?
Right.
But we're not alone in this. Primates teaching their young to use tools, birds with distinct regional songs. It's all cultural inheritance in action.
So we've gone from genes to behaviors to entire cultures. It's like inheritance. Inheritance is less about a blueprint and more about a library. Like
Yeah.
it's filled with different types of information being shared and adapted over time. But how does the environment fit into all of this? It's not like you can inherit a specific tree or a particularly sunny day, right?
Right. But you can inherit the tools to deal with that sunny day or that specific tree. Think about it this way. Your environment, the food you eat, the temperature, even like the presence of predators, it all shapes you, right?
Absolutely. I'm a product of my environment for sure.
Yeah.
But how is that passed down?
Let's talk gut flora. You inherit a whole ecosystem of microbes from your mom at birth. This microbial community, it affects your digestion, your immune system, even your brain development.
Wait, so our moms give us this invisible world of bacteria that helps us thrive. It's both amazing and kind of gross at the same time.
It highlights how inheritance is about so much more than just genes, right?
Yeah.
It's the entire developmental context,
Okay.
including your environment, your social interactions, even your internal environment. That shapes who you are.
It's like this multi-layered cake. And genes are just one ingredient, but it's the combination of all the layers, all the flavors, that make the cake what it is.
And that's where this organism-centered view of evolution takes shape.
Okay.
Because if inheritance is the transmission of all this information, organisms, through their choices and actions, they directly impact what gets passed down.
So it's like we're moving from this passive model of evolution to an active one. Organisms aren't just along for the ride. They're grabbing the wheel and steering.
They're grabbing the wheel.
Mm.
But how do we even begin to study this agency?
Yeah, that's a good question.
We need to start thinking about organisms as goal-oriented systems.
Okay.
Now, I know what you're thinking.
What?
Doesn't that sound a little too mystical for science?
Yeah, like we're suddenly saying that trees have feelings and rocks have aspirations.
Not quite.
Okay.
We're not talking about some divine purpose or conscious intent. We're talking about an observable, natural goal-directedness that comes from the very essence of being alive.
Okay.
Think about like the inherent drive to survive, to reproduce.
Okay.
We see it in the way a plant grows towards the sunlight, a white blood cell chases down a bacterium, a bird meticulously builds its nest.
Okay, so we're not saying that, like, organisms are making to-do lists and checking them twice. It's more about recognizing this inherent drive, this natural purpose, as the source material called it, that exists at every level of life.
Exactly. From DNA repair mechanisms diligently fixing errors, to animals seeking food and shelter, there's a clear striving for a particular outcome. It's this element of active pursuit that separates living things from non-living matter. A rock doesn't strive to stay on top of a hill,
Right.
but a plant strives to reach the sunlight. It's the subtle yet really profound difference that we need to explore.
This is making me rethink those amazing time-lapse videos of plants growing. It's like they're reaching, stretching, almost deliberately to find the best position for their leaves.
And that reaching, that striving, it's not random.
Right.
It's a response to internal signals, to environmental cues that guides the plant towards a specific outcome, survival. And over time, those responses can lead to adaptations that make the plant even better at capturing sunlight, ensuring the success of future generations.
This natural purpose idea is definitely a game changer. But how does it connect to organisms being agents in their own evolution?
Well, if organisms are goal-oriented, able to respond to their environment and make choices that affect their survival and reproduction, well, those choices directly influence their evolutionary path.
Okay.
It's a feedback loop.
So it's like organisms are shaping the very forces that drive their evolution. It's not just about adapting to what's there, but about creating the conditions for new adaptations to arise.
And that brings us to niche construction.
Niche construction.
Niche construction. The idea that organisms, they don't just adapt to their surroundings, they actively modify them, creating new possibilities for themselves and other species.
The classic example being beavers building dams, right? They're not just finding a suitable environment, they're making their own.
Exactly. And those dams, they have ripple effects, right? They're changing the water flow, the vegetation, the whole ecosystem. Niche construction, it's happening everywhere. From earthworm burrows aerating the soil to those massive coral reefs, the ones that provide homes for countless marine species.
Wow.
It's organisms engineering their own evolutionary playground.
This is blowing my mind. We went from genes as destiny to organisms actively shaping their own destinies. It's like we've stumbled onto a whole new level of evolution.
And it's a level that challenges us to rethink some really fundamental scientific assumptions. If organisms are agents, do they have conscious intent, foresight? These are big questions with no easy answers.
This is getting pretty deep. We've covered so much ground already. Expanded views of inheritance, goal-oriented organisms, niche construction. It's a lot to process.
You're right, it is a lot to take in, but it's also incredibly exciting. Because if we can understand how organisms exert their influence, how they shape their own evolutionary trajectories, we gain a whole new understanding of life itself.
And on that note, we're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll delve into the philosophical implications of this organism-centered view. What does it mean for our understanding of agency, purpose, and the very nature of scientific inquiry? Stay tuned for the final part of this mind-expanding deep dive. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been on quite a journey, haven't we? Exploring this whole idea of organisms as active agents in their own evolution.
Yeah.
It really flips the script on how we traditionally view the natural world.
It certainly does. And, as we delve deeper into this organism-centered view, we inevitably bump up against some pretty fascinating philosophical questions
Right.
about agency, purpose, even the very foundation of scientific inquiry.
So let's talk philosophy. We've been saying organisms are goal-oriented, but how does that square with that traditional scientific view of the universe as like a giant mechanistic clockwork?
That's the heart of the debate. The source material argues that this strict adherence to mechanism, this insistence that everything can be explained solely by the laws of physics and chemistry, it might actually be limiting our understanding of life. It's like trying to understand a painting by analyzing the chemical composition of its pigments. You might learn about the materials, but you're gonna miss the art itself.
It's like we've been so focused on the gears and springs of the clock that we've forgotten to ask what time it is or why we even care about time in the first place.
Exactly. And this is where the concept of emergence becomes really crucial.
Okay.
Complex systems, like organisms, they can exhibit properties and behaviors that are more than just the sum of their parts.
Okay.
These emergent properties, they arise from the interactions between those parts. But you can't fully predict them or even explain them simply by analyzing those individual components in isolation.
So a flock of birds, it's not just a bunch of individual birds flying around. The flock has its own patterns of movement, its own collective intelligence
Right.
that emerges from the interactions between the individual birds.
Precisely. And just like that flock of birds, an organism, it's more than just a collection of genes or cells, right? It's a dynamic, self-organizing system with emergent properties, like goal-directedness, adaptability, even a kind of meaning-making that shapes its interactions with the world.
This makes that leukocyte we talked about earlier, the one chasing down bacteria, even more amazing.
Right.
It's not just blindly following a program, it's responding to its environment, making decisions on the fly, pursuing a goal to neutralize those invaders and keep the organism healthy.
And that kind of goal-directed behavior, that striving for a particular outcome, it isn't easily explained by a purely mechanistic worldview.
Right.
It requires us to kind of broaden our understanding of causality to recognize that organisms themselves, they can be causal agents shaping their own destinies.
So it's not just about external forces acting on organisms, it's about organisms actively pushing back,
Yes.
influencing their environment, guiding their own evolutionary journey.
Yeah.
That's a pretty radical shift in thinking.
It is radical, and it has significant implications, not just for biology, but for how we view ourselves as human beings. If we accept that even simple organisms can be agents in their own right, then we, with our complex brains and self-awareness, must be considered agents on a whole other level.
It's like the classic nature versus nurture debate just got a whole lot more interesting.
Yeah.
It's not just about our genes determining who we are. It's about the choices we make, the experiences we have, the environments we create, all feeding back into this grand evolutionary story.
Absolutely. And it highlights the importance of taking responsibility for our actions and their consequences. Not just for ourselves, but for the future of life on this planet. Our choices matter, not just in our own lives, but on an evolutionary timescale.
This is a lot to take in, but there's something, I don't know, there's something kind of empowering about this organism-centered view.
All right.
It's not about being helpless products of our genes or our environment.
Hmm.
It's about recognizing our own agency,
Yes.
our capacity to shape our destiny and contribute to the ongoing story of life.
It's a story that's still being written, and we are all characters in that story. Every choice we make, every action we take, it adds a new sentence, a new paragraph to the ever-unfolding narrative of life on Earth.
So, so if we embrace this new understanding of organisms as agents, how do we apply it to our own life? What do we do with this knowledge?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And there's no, like, single easy answer, but I think the first step is simply awareness.
Okay.
To recognize that we are not just passive observers of the natural world, but active participants in a grand, interconnected web of life.
And with that participation comes, like, a responsibility to make choices that contribute to the flourishing of that web, to act as stewards of a planet that's not just ours to inherit, but ours to shape, to nurture, to evolve alongside.
Precisely. And perhaps this perspective can also inspire a deeper appreciation for the incredible creativity and resilience of life itself, its ability to adapt, to innovate, and to create new possibilities, even in the face of challenges. It's a testament to the power of life to not just survive, but to thrive, to become more than it was yesterday, and to pave the way for an even richer, more diverse future.
That's an incredibly hopeful and inspiring thought to end on. We've gone from, like, questioning the very nature of life to glimpsing its boundless potential.
And that, I think, is the beauty of embracing an organism-centered view. It doesn't just answer old questions. It opens up a whole universe of new ones, inviting us to see ourselves and the world around us with fresh eyes and to approach the future with a renewed sense of wonder and responsibility.
Well said. And on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the fascinating world of organisms and their remarkable role in their own evolution. We hope you've enjoyed the journey as much as we have.
Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and never underestimate the power of life to surprise and inspire.